All right. Now, as I said, I told you about Kennedy. Now, in 1960, John Fitzgerald Kennedy becomes president. He's actually a beloved president. And there's still a balance of power between the Soviet Union and the United States. This is the Soviet Union, Uncle Sam. As I said, I'm sorry, United States, Uncle Sam. The Soviet Union is represented by the bear. Okay? Roar, big scary bear. And they're balancing for power over the world. Okay? Now, they're also balancing over what is called the missile gap. Okay? The missile gap basically means that for every, at the point when Kennedy comes into office, for every 14 missiles that America was making, the Soviets were making one. So we had what was called a 14-to-1 missile gap. That meant we had 13 more missiles that we could launch and kill them. Now, the craziness in all this is when we build up these nuclear arsenals to unheard of amounts, you really need just about 8 to end the entire world. And at the height of the Cold War, we had somewhere in the neighborhood of 20 to 50,000 of these things lying around with some crazy people just with a push button, hey, I'm going to do it. We'll get to that in a second. Okay, so that's the missile gap, the idea of that you've got to maintain this, you've got to build more than the other people, kind of in the vein of MAD, okay? So there's our missile. Now, Kennedy liked what FDR, what Truman had kind of done with the Marshall Plan. And so he makes a mini Marshall Plan that he calls the Alliance for Progress. And you can tell here by the Venezuelan sign here in Benvenidos, it was mainly focused at Latin America, because Latin America is third world. Now, the problem with that is if we go look at the people who are falling to communism, they are third world countries, meaning they're not developed, they're not industrialized, they don't have shoes in some cases, and so they want this. And so the Alliance for Progress is where the United States will come down using the Peace Corps, which we'll talk about later on in the 60s, kind of a volunteer army. They would come down and they would help build waters and dam rivers and all kinds of fun stuff, right? And so we're doing this. One of the big programs they had was actually called Doctors Without Borders. It's still around today. Now, one such doctor took the vein from Kennedy and was like, hey, I'm going to go see what the problems are. And this young man named Ernesto rode a motorcycle. And there's a movie made about him called The Motorcycle Diaries. All down through South America. He traveled the Amazon. He did a ton of stuff. And he found all this poverty. And then he started reading a book, and it changed him, and then he decided to basically go and revolutionize things. Now, a nickname for Ernesto is Che. The man I'm talking about is this man. You've probably seen this picture around. His name is Che Guevara. Now, Che Guevara is going to participate in communist revolutions throughout Latin America. He's going to liberate them from nationalist governments, and he's responsible for a lot of communism entering into Latin America through nationalism and different things like that. Now, the biggest one we associate Che Guevara with is our neighbor to the south, Cuba. Che Guevara arrives here in Cuba, where there's a military dictator in power by the name of Fulgencio Batista. And Fulgencio Batista was a guy, and it was very common through Latin America as well, that if you didn't like somebody, you just took him out back and you killed him. So, Che Guevara arrives with these group of communist rebels who want to overthrow him and set up a communist Cuba. And the man they were trying to help out, get rid of Batista, seen here, is named Fidel Castro. And so Fidel Castro is a young communist rebel. Che Guevara comes in, kind of feeds them stuff about how they helped win. It was a very long and bloody battle, but in the end, Bautista will be disposed of. He's basically ran out of the country, and Castro takes power. Now, there is also a myth, and I'll show you a video about this where you can see it. But there's a religion in Cuba called Santeria, and in Santeria they said that the savior of Cuba would be announced by white doves. Well, when Castro rolled through the city of Havana, there were white doves flying overhead, and a lot of the people took this as a sign and loved him. Okay? Now, this whole movement through Latin America becoming communist, we call the pink wave. Now, why the pink wave? Red is the color we associate with communism. Red Scare, remember all that? Red Skull, Captain America, remember? And so pink is kind of red, just kind of watered down, right? It's kind of not really as scary as red. They're not as intense as the communists of Europe, but they do like communism, okay? Now, in going through all this, the next thing is the United States does not like the idea of Castro being communist so close to us. And so Eisenhower, and this happened under Eisenhower, started working on a plan to invade Cuba. And so when Eisenhower leaves office, it is inherited by John F. Kennedy, and that's going to be in the next video. We're going to talk about what that whole thing was and what that led to.